One, I guess, would be interesting is just talking about your conception or your conceptualization of a creator being. I'm sure you've heard me talk about God a number of times on the podcast. So I would like to hear you. I've heard you before, but it always evolves and develops.
Sure.
And you can get better at using your words to try to, say the untouchable with words, but describe your understanding of God or the creator being, and why do you like saying the creator being?
I actually have different terms for what I call what God or creator or source. I think all of them could apply.
Okay.
And I think that the main, so I feel that there are, I'm going to give my feeling about what I understand about God, and then I'll work backwards as to how I've come to those conclusions. So I do believe that God is a being that is soul-based.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by that? Like, I think the better way to answer is, why do you feel the need to use your words to distinguish that? Because to me, I've always understood it as like, no. The thing that you're saying about God is not how I see it. It's specifically a being.
Well, because some people like to view God as an energy or a force that just animates all.
Okay.
And I don't view God that way. I think that God has a character and a personality and a nature. And is not just like plugging in a toaster and pressing the button. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but do you think there's a way for God to simultaneously be an abstract force, but to also have the personality traits that are that of a being? Like animate all the things you said, but also to be this more abstract force.
I do think that's possible. And actually my conception of God was rooted in Catholicism. I was brought up Catholic and went to Catholic school. And I'm not Catholic now, and I have a lot of issues with Christianity in general, and also the mysticism on which Christianity was based off of, which we call Judaism. But there are kernels of truth, I feel, in all of it, and I do believe in like there being like one God. So they do teach that that is like a thing, right?
Yeah, the monotheism is the nugget which you still hold on to from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the difference is that I believe that God is like totally loving, whereas what you find in the Torah and in the Old Testament and a lot of times in the New Testament is that God is this punishing, vengeful man. And I wouldn't even say that God's a man. I would say that God is a complete being that probably is masculine and feminine. I mean, really, if anything, see, this is like one of those things I never get. Like, in all of the people that talk about these major religions, right? None of them talk about like the femininity. Like, where is the feminine energy that is necessary for creation, Yeah. So you can see that there's like some grabbles there because they're totally ignoring
what I think. And again, we're not, this stuff is not hardwired or like has hard boundaries, but I think if we're speaking, where is the femininity in the text? Like we're talking about biblical stuff.
Yeah.
I think that they use God as the masculine force and they use nature as the feminine force. That's what I seem to like. There's God and there's Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, I view, going back to answering your question of like what my conception is, I think that God has masculine and feminine aspects, but it's the same being. And that's even if masculinity and femininity exist. I don't really know, because like some cells just divide, like one becomes two, So I'm not necessarily trying to project like what I think. In other words, like, I don't know, everyone has this conception of God being a man, but like God being a man wouldn't reproduce with himself.
Yeah, I mean, and also I've never, again, even with something like that, seeing God as a man, to me, one, I don't personally do that myself. To me, I've always seen, not always, but I think I've come around to seeing this, seeing God as a man, to that concept itself serves as a function. Like, it's not that it is definitely scientifically the case, right? Because the case is he's neither. It's neither. It's not, it doesn't make sense to, but see, I think when you think about it specifically as a being, that's when you start to personify it, and then you start to wonder, well, is it a man or a woman? It's like, it doesn't really matter. But if you're talking about abstract forces, you do believe that there's an abstract masculine force and an abstract feminine force, right? Or is that also what you're saying? I don't know.
Well, we call. Okay, so I acknowledge that there is a male force and a female force. I don't know if that necessarily attributes to masculinity and femininity, because I look around in our culture and I see a lot of warped views on what masculinity and femininity are from all angles. So it leads me to question whether it's a totally human concept.
Well, I guess we could argue all things that we have words for are merely human concepts, because I think when you get to the nature of what everything is, if masculinity and femininity are forces, wouldn't you agree that within each person that you've got some mix of masculinity and femininity? You're not 100% masculine or 100% feminine, right? Because what do we even attribute as masculinity and femininity? Yeah, but I do think that whether we are a man or a woman does matter in that mix. I mean, it's almost kind of like you think the yin and yang thing. There's the black side that has a little white dot, and then there's the white side that has a little black dot. So it's like you could say the man is like the black with a little white dot of femininity.
Yeah.
Every man has a little bit of femininity. Every woman has a little bit of masculinity, and then it can vary. Some men have more femininity, and some women have more masculinity than most. And then of course there's this weird thing where people are more androgynous, and you can't even tell what they are, and and that kind of thing. And I mean that's a whole different conversation. But I think what I was getting at in terms of like, think about reality, like everything beyond whatever you can put into existence is a single cake. And I think something like saying that there's a masculine energy or a feminine energy, these are human concepts, and it's just one way of cutting the cake. It's not like it's the only way of cutting the cake. It's not it's not that these things necessarily exist, like we can pull evidence that this is the case, that there is a masculine energy and a feminine energy, but it's concepts in the mind that we use to divide up the world. Like this is the nature of masculine energy, this is the nature of feminine energy. The truth is it's all one thing, and that there is no anything. There's no use to use words to divide reality or cut the cake. We don't even have to cut the cake at all, but to play with ideas. And so that's what I think God is. I think he is a way of cutting the cake. And you can choose to cut the cake and say God is particularly the highest form of masculine energy and the high order in the universe. You can cut the cake that way. Or you can have this other view of God, like, no, God's a woman. God's all the feminine energy in the world. You can have that, and you can see the world that way. And I think that's what matters, is whatever you choose to believe or were led to believe and was chosen for you by someone else, or you unconsciously believe, that's going to be the way that it comes back to this thing about, if you believe your name Michael has this meaning that one who is like God, you're going to see the world through that lens. You're going to see yourself in your reflection that way. Same thing. If I think I'm a goddamn piece of shit because my name's Cameron, I'm going to see the world that way. So if I see God as the highest being and I see God as a woman, I'm going to focus on all the elements that I believe and experience as feminine energy. Be like, that's God. When I talk to God, I'm gonna hear a woman's voice because I believe that. So I think that's what I'm getting at with the whole masculine feminine thing. I'm not saying like you don't think that this is a real thing. It's just more.
No, I totally get it, and I agree with everything you said.
Okay, cool.
So So this being, I feel, is not, in other words, like the creator is not a part of their own creation.
Right.
So I do feel that there is some separation between us being in an environment and access to the creator. But I feel that there is a force that each person or each living soul has a direct connection to this being, that if they want to communicate with the creator on the creator's terms, they can do that. And so the way I was taught to do this is that I was taught to recognize that there are, okay, so I'm skipping ahead here. So like, I believe this being has love for us.
Yeah.
This is a pretty important part, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can imagine.
Yeah. This being, I mean, again, if you're intellectually allowing yourself to come along with this conversation, right? Like I'm suggesting that the creator of our total environment here is separate from this place, but yet has a conduit of energy to connect to each person should you want to access it, okay? The way to access this being's love is to be humble. And by humble, I mean to have a desire to feel all of your own emotions. So let's say, for example, that you believe that men are better than women, okay? If that's a belief in your soul, and that belief does not agree with the creator, in other words, if the creator believes that there is no better, that men and women are two aspects of one, then that's going to harm or hinder your ability to connect with the creator on this particular issue. So essentially, I believe my understanding of how we get blocked up spiritually is that we inherit beliefs from our parents, people around us, society, our teachers, our friends, and ourselves. But like when I say like we absorb, I mean like from the moment of conception, like when you're gestating in your mother's womb, like you're absorbing her emotional state, her thoughts, beliefs, feelings about everything. And oftentimes,
something you said to me a long time ago, I love this idea. And I don't know if you still believe this specifically, but I like this idea that you see DNA as crystallized emotion.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that, again, DNA is the effect of a long history of crystallized trauma. I think it's trauma, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's crystallized trauma. Right. And so
I like emotion. Because it's more of a neutral term where I feel like trauma is inherently negative.
You're right. Crystallized emotion is probably better. But if you look at like countries and nations and ethnicities, it's like it's groups of people that self-select inside of their own community traits that they value and attributes or characters of the various people that then, have families and have lots of children and all this kind of stuff, right? And that those can manifest into physical manifestations. I mean, that's we look different. Our like I said, our DNA, right? We say like, oh, you've got this DNA, so that your ears look this way or your hair looks this way. But what if like we have the ability to change our DNA?
We do.
I believe we do as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it can get pretty weird because if people start to like come to the realization that they could do that, that has all kinds of ramifications for like even the nature of reality. Yeah.
Well, they say that the whole like archetypal story of rescuing your father from the belly of the beast, that's what it's about. Changing DNA. It's about taking the DNA, the disposition that you were given by your father, and using your finite time in life to shift that DNA in you so that you pass it along better DNA to your children.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and so something you touched on earlier about behaving in a way that is outside of harmony with the creator being's view of love.
Yeah.
Something I've learned over the years that I feel like scratches the surface of that from like a scientific side of things is, we have this idea that like our morality and ethics are societal constructs, but they seem to be, the reality is that they seem to be much more biologically rooted in organism behavior. Like, because you can look at wolves in the wild, like when a beta and alpha are getting in a fight with each other, and then the alpha pins down the beta and has the ability to bite out its throat and kill it. It doesn't. It shows it mercy there. And another interesting thing is these experiments with rats, how they have like an obviously bigger rat wrestling and playing with the smaller rat, and if the big rat wants to win every time, it can. But I think 1 out of every 4 times or 1 out of every 3 times, the big rat always lets the little rat win so that the little rat will continue to play. Because if it doesn't do that, then the little rat will just stop playing.
Yeah.
So there does seem to be, even in like, animal behavior, this sort of like acting out of ethics that seems to be like biologically rooted.
Yeah, but we take it so far because we get violent and we kill each other, and that's not chill.
Well, yeah. Well, I would say that behavior is outside of the creator's view of love. But what I'm saying is those behaviors, like the wolf example, and the mouse behavior. I think that though that is like the creator's view of love being part of this biologically rooted ethos, and that I think the thing that separates us from the animals is having the ability and the choice to act outside of that. And the world will show us, like, by living in a psychological space of hell, an actual physical space of war and hell and famine and all kinds of things. And that's something that I think you might like. I had an interesting conversation with a couple of missionaries earlier this week. And it was just kind of a random thing that happened. Random.
Were they Mormons?
No, they were Christians.
Well, Mormons are Christians, but go ahead.
I don't know. I wouldn't call Mormons a faction of Christianity.
Were they wearing the okay, that's fine. Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, I think they were Methodists.
Okay.
But I think that it was kind of like they started Catholics, and one of them was this, and then they decided together as a couple they're going to be Methodist.
Okay.
To meet in the middle somewhere.
Okay.
Anyway. Or no, I think maybe one was Catholic, one was Methodist, and they decided to meet in the middle at Episcopalian. That might be right.
Okay.
I could be getting this confused with Mr. Truvia I had on the last podcast. But anyway. Something about and I think that this is comparable to like this relationship you would have with the creator being of finding out what is loving harmony, a harmonious, loving way of being. That's what your goal is, to have that relationship with the creator being, to guide you into what is the most loving and harmonious.
You're going to make mistakes.
Right.
But you get to test some things out. Yeah.
So these people's concept was more like, please replace the word creator being with Jesus Christ, right? So you have, and I know that that's a loaded thing and that you have all sorts of thoughts about that. But,
I do.
But let's just assume from an objective point of view that you guys are actually abstractly talking about the same thing. You just have different images and words that you're using for it.
Yeah.
Because I think you both are focused on this idea of, how do I have a relationship with this other thing outside of me that is guiding me towards a loving way of being? Both of you agree on that. So now, you might have differences in identifying what is and is not loving behavior. I wouldn't put that past you. But you might not. You might have a lot of similar ideas there. You don't know. So in that, this guy was saying that he found that the Bible and a lot of these different factions of Christianity or biblical teachings actually are overcomplicating the whole thing, and that the overcomplication of, like, this is why people go do missions for several years, and they think they have to do this to have that loving relationship and have that relationship with Jesus or whatever. And so he's saying it's much more simple than that, and you just ask for forgiveness. You have that immediate relationship and forgiveness, and then you're guided by it. And he says that the overcomplication in the churches and in the text, this is a trick of the devil. And so I thought that you might find that interesting, because I think that you said things that are not those words exactly, because this is more of a Christian who has a personal relationship with Jesus, his rhetoric. But I think that you guys say some same ideas, just with different rhetoric and different imagery in your heads. And I'm not saying you believe the same thing, but
I understand what you're saying.
I'm finding a parallel.
You're observing, you're perceiving very similar behaviors between two people who may believe totally different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand. My response to that is that I think that in this concept of trying to, like, have a better relationship with the Creator, and by the way, in that, I mean, like, that your emotional state is elevated and your ability to manifest things that are within the boundaries of love come at you fast and furious, you know? I think that if you keep looking to change all of your beliefs to ultimately match up with the Creator being, like, vibrationally speaking, I think that's what a Christ is. So whereas, like, I feel that each person could be a Christ, Christianity teaches that Yeshua, who's a man, that being is God, and therefore you shouldn't try to be like God, because that's blasphemy.
Yeah, well, and this is one of those things where, from my understanding of having similar conversations in the past, and also, like, as you said, and as I picked up on, like, you have some qualms with Christianity, and I'm sure it has a lot to do with your specific experience, with it. And,
of course.
And I kind of see a lot of the qualms to be colored by your personal experience. And I see, like, the text, or even just taking something specific like the figure, the archetypal personality of Jesus Christ, as, like, this abstract painting that's hanging up in a gallery, and then you're looking at it, and then someone else is looking at it, and you just have completely different reactions and interpretations to it. And it's like, your reaction might be one that's exuding and bringing up this trauma in you, where this person might actually be have completely different details and views about this thing that are actually very beneficial and do serve them in what you're describing as this emotionally expansive journey.
I understand totally what you're saying. I would say that I would say that I'm not speaking to, like, what I'm saying is not going to be of value or of interest to most people. But for those people that have been brought up in Christianity and are no longer a part of Christianity for whatever reason, I would say that there are inherent beliefs within Christianity that color our view of reality that I feel are non-loving and are insidious and can cause emotional problems in our lives, because I feel that if we hold on to things, our soul is going to manifest what's in a part of our soul. So, like, I'll give an example, okay? In Christianity, you're taught that Jesus died for your sins, okay? And that by believing in him as the Son of God and God, I guess, I don't think that saying he's the Son of God is blasphemy, because I think we're all children of God. But to say that he is God, I personally think is incorrect. But they believe in Christianity, Jesus is God, and his assassination allows for everyone who believes that he was God to go to heaven. Mm-hmm. I think that's a pretty fair summarization of part of what they believe. Mm-hmm. Okay. Part of that is a belief that sacrifice is love, or that loving behavior includes sacrifice. You see, because Jesus sacrificed his life for all of us.
And you think that's non-loving, the sacrifice?
Totally. Totally. I don't think there's anything about his assassination that does anything for anyone's soul. I think that being did live, and I believe that he attempted to teach people how to have a personal relationship with the Creator. And I think that his strength to the creative source was incredibly threatening to every single person. I understand that.
Yeah. So and again, you understand like my interpretation of these things. Like it goes back to this cake cutting thing where it's like, I'm not making claims whether this person did or did not exist. In fact, I don't care.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that there's evidence that he does, and I've heard people say it just doesn't.
There's really not a whole lot of evidence to suggest that he really lived, but
right.
there's know.
Yeah, and to me, that's all beside the point. It goes back to just it's an abstract representative painting, and so I think that this idea that how you presented it is I think to get right to the point is you say, I don't believe that his sacrifice is meaningful or did anything.
Correct.
Right. And so I think that that's just the nature of belief is if you don't believe it did anything, it doesn't do anything for you. But if you do believe it does something for you, it does do something for you. And I think that's the line in the sand, and that's what I think the nature of something like a biblical text or a religion is like. It has very much to do with the conscious unconscious relationship you have with the text or the belief or the icon or the symbolism. It's how are you processing it? How are you using it? Either consciously is maybe 10% of it, and then 90% of it is, are you emotionally connected to it? Do you emotionally, against your control, feel uplifted by this thing? And do you feel in your body through emotional expansion that Jesus Christ's sacrifice moves you higher spiritually and that you feel relieved of your sin? So I think... Yeah, I think I put my finger right on it there. Is that the binary difference of do you believe it or not? And because you don't, it doesn't do it for you. But if one did, it does.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to argue with like the placebo effect and the power of your mind playing a role in creating. Well, but the placebo effect is just you creating the reality, right?
I guess, but see, it sounds like you're undermining the placebo effect.
No, I respect the placebo effect a lot.
Because it's very real.
It's incredible.
In fact, what we were talking about earlier about mind over matter, where it's like you can have physical illnesses because of what's going on with your mind and emotionally, that's exactly what the placebo effect is.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, you can think yourself into cancer. It's very real.
Yes, I agree. So, okay, but taking that, I do believe that there are ways that you can experiment with yourself as a person, as an individual, with your emotions to try to see if you can manifest a more favorable reality for yourself. And I think it all has to do with challenging your emotions and feeling out your emotions. So, like, this gets back to taking in your art, right?
Yeah.
If there's something in me, like if I'm identifying with anger in one of your songs, okay, then like I talk to God about it. Or I will actually feel out the anger in the comfort of my own home. And like that, initiating that process actually creates a physical response where like my body might shake out, which is what I would call fear, and then maybe cry.
Right.
And it's in those moments, and you know, we've all had experiences where we are taking in art, we're at a concert, we're even at a comedy show, and we're laughing so hard we cry, or the music is hitting us so hard that that we cry. And I think that's like a grief release, joy intake kind of thing. And I think that like those kinds of experiences are the things that help our soul expand.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's about challenging yourself and feeling out your negative emotions to grow.
Yeah. So, and this is going back to like high level here. To me, and I'm not saying this either negatively. This is more just a neutral observation. To me, I've always kind of seen your position on this sort of thing as, if you imagine, just for the sake of simplifying it for metaphorical purpose, or using metaphor for simplification purposes, if a religious ideology or a spiritual ideology is more like a software that we're putting in our mind and body, you can think of Christianity like that. It's like, I don't want to make it up myself, so I'm going to use a book that already exists. I'm a Christian, right? That's what a lot of people do, because it's simple. They don't need to take that burden on themselves. And in fact, there's an argument to be made for that, because there's a humbleness to that position of like, I don't feel that in my limitations as a human being that I can take it upon myself to come up with an entire robust religious spiritual text that's going to take care of me better than those ancient ones that already exist, that people have been working on for like a lot of our evolution and development. So to me, and I think this is what a lot of people do who are like spiritual but not religious, is they take it upon themselves to create their own, right? Like, I don't need the software that already exists. I can create it on my own. Either they're pinning that on their own ego, or they have a belief. It sounds to me like you are co-creating this with the creator being, right? The creator being is that which guides you in coming up with a superior software to the flawed software that is Christianity, Judaism, blah, 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 blah. Would you say that that's a fair analysis?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah. So, I from there, and another interesting thing that came up with this conversation that I feel like is, again, it's this gold nugget that I feel like is sort of the pan, like in the most, what's the word? Forgiving interpretation of all the ancient religions. I feel like the thing that we all agree on in non-secular terms is love is the way, fear is not. Fear is the opposite of the way. And I feel like that's the thing I wish that everyone could just like understand that we agree on, because we do. When you get down to brass tacks, no one's like, no, love is bad and fear is good. No one's doing that, except for the people that are like genuinely trying to be corrupt. Now, the definitions people have of what love is, that's where we need to converse and talk about what love is.